The sun has gone down at Hangman's Hill, and the ghost at Misery Corner isn't walking tonight. So, welcome to the Weird Tales Radio Show, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic, and folklore. And now, here's your host, writer, award-winning journalist, best-selling author, and sometime werewolf hunter, Charles Christian.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Weird Tales Radio Show with me, Charles Christian. Thank you for tuning in again. We've another packed show for you, but first, some property news. Yes, real estate. It's a desres for vampires, I suppose. Bran Castle in Transylvania, that's in Romania, is on the market. The former home of Vlad Dracula, aka Vlad Tepes, the Impaler, the Wallachian ruler in the Middle Ages. He's thought to be the inspiration for Bram Stoker's Dracula. Anyway, his castle is now on sale and available for £50 million or $66 million. It's 800 years old, it has 57 rooms, but no indoor plumbing. However, hot and cold running children of the night can be found in all rooms.
Listen to them. Children of the night. What music they make.
Okay, still keeping up with the horror angle there. Obviously, Dracula, a well-known horror movie. There's a new British horror movie out. It's called St. Maud, and it's just gone out on general release in cinemas across the UK, and it also has international representation, so you should be able to catch it in the US and Europe. It's been described as the best British horror movie in recent years. The two actors playing the female lead characters, the actors are Morfydd Clark and Jennifer Earle, have received rave reviews for their work. The Evening Standard newspaper said of the writer and director Rose Glass, "This is one of the best British debuts of all time," while the BBC arts critic Will Gompertz described it as a Halloween horror with Oscars potential. I'm particularly intrigued with it as it makes use of locations in and around Scarborough, my old hometown, on the Yorkshire coast, which is also why Time Out magazine described the movie as a startling seaside wig-out. Welcome to The Exorcist on Sea. As I mentioned earlier, I was born in Scarborough, and earlier this week I had the honour of taking part in an online panel discussion and Q&A on the St. Maud movie and why Yorkshire's coast has always been a natural home for horror. Remember, Bram Stoker's Dracula, which we just mentioned earlier, Dracula actually makes landfall in the port of Whitby, which is just 20 miles north of Scarborough. Anyway, among the other people involved in the Q&A was Andrea Caldwell, one of the producers of the movie, and over the weekend I also managed to record a short interview with Andrea. Right, let's talk about St. Maud, the movie. Now, it's getting rave reviews all over the place, which is really surprising for I suppose you'd say low budget, not a big Hollywood epic British horror movie. And you also have taken a punt, as you're the producers, with going for a relatively unknown writer and director for the movie.
Yeah, it's our debut feature.
So what attracted you to the story, and what is it about? Because, jaded people will say, well, surely we've seen every variation of horror movie under the sun already. What's so different about it?
Yeah, it's a very personal filmmaker's vision, and I think hopefully it is something fresh that people haven't seen before. It came to us through the writer-director, so it wasn't a case of us kind of bringing her onto a project that we were otherwise doing. So This is all absolutely kind of born out of her imagination, and she'd made some fantastic short films before, but this was something that she'd been percolating for quite some time as an idea to make her first feature film. I think horror is always inventive, actually. It's one of those genres that's been around since the beginning of cinema, but does always find ways. I mean, yes, it's it's set in a large house, which is very much the domain of any number of kind of haunted house or ghost stories.
Yes.
Neither of which this one is. And yes, I mean, I think any film that exists, you can kind of find bits of its DNA in older films and things that have inspired filmmakers, but hopefully are putting together in ways that are unexpected. And but we very much feel that this is something which feels contemporary and entertaining, but inspired by some of the greats, Carrie, Rosemary's Baby, bits of Exorcist, and so we're very much harking back to that era of horror filmmaking.
And it is set in the present day.
Absolutely, yes, it's all present day. There is a kind of retro feel to parts of it. I think we are playing with the idea of it being quite timeless. But yes, I mean you know immediately that you're in the world of modern day.
One of the features of it, you've set it up in, or did the filming up in Yorkshire in the Scarborough area, I believe. What was the choice for that? Because again, London tends to be the centre, and anywhere within an easy commute of London tends to be where the locations are, whereas Scarborough is literally at the end of the line. And, I mean, I grew up there, so I know how remote it is.
Okay, invested interest, yes. Well, I mean, there is actually, certainly from sort of British filmmaking, there is a bit of a move to, rightly so, to spread the work around the country a bit and not just continually show London, and everyone gets fed up with that. It's not good for anyone. So, I mean, you do get a lot of films shot in Scotland and Wales and all sorts of parts of the UK. But yeah, I mean, there are a lot of film crew in London. There's a lot of facilities in London. It's still a bit of a hub. But I think Rose always saw this film as set in a coastal town, one that we wouldn't identify in the film. It's never named, but there's a lot of thematic resonance for British towns on the edge of something. It's a character that feels very much pushed out and excluded from the world around her, and to have her literally on the edge is something that does give a certain atmosphere too. And even the character played by Jennifer Ely, who was a famous dancer who is now suffering from a kind of late stage cancer and is very much holed up in this large, slightly gothic house. She's a character that's sort of in hiding from many aspects of her own life. So we did like this feeling of anonymity. But we love Scarborough. It's got a grandeur. It's got these fantastic Victorian buildings that relate to its heyday as a big resort, and the Grand Hotel, etc. Yeah. And but it's very cinematic. You get this very big drop down to the Crescent Beach.
Yes.
So when you're up on the higher levels, you can look down and see pretty much the whole beach laid out in front of you. And then, of course, all the parade of arcades. And at night, it takes on quite a different quality. You suddenly get all the kind of coloured lights and the neon and slightly more garish colour schemes coming out. And we were filming just before Christmas, so it's raining, it's Yorkshire, but filmmakers love all that because you get lovely reflections and you get wet pavements, and so it all very much worked for us.
It's on general release from
today.
Today, that's the 9th of October.
Absolutely, yeah.
And what sort of cinematic release has it got? Because again, sometimes local films, they end up being shown in a handful of northern cinemas or something, but nobody else gets a look in.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much everywhere now. It's extraordinary. I mean, we're releasing this film in unusual times. Even over the last few weeks, there's been these huge announcements about Cineworld closing down actually yesterday, and who own the Picture House chain as well, which is also one of the kind of real stalwarts of the art house cinema. So, that was quite a big blow. But our distributor, Studio Canal, have done a fantastic job, and it's playing in all the cinemas that would book it, Odeons and multiplexes, as well as Everyman's and Curzon cinemas. So it really is sitting across the whole gamut of multiplexes and more independent cinemas. There's not very much out at the moment, so I think that this is something which hopefully, if people feel safe to come out to cinemas, and cinemas are taking such great strides to be mindful of all of the safety around COVID and the spacings and the capacity and masks. So it's something that we hope people will feel able to enjoy on a big screen.
Yes, indeed. And also an ideal time of the year to launch it, as we're sort of heading towards Halloween and
Absolutely.
All things spooky and the darker nights and everything.
That is very much part of the thinking, yeah. And again, because, sometimes with independent films, because there's so many releases coming out, you sort of come up for one weekend and then you get knocked sideways by the next big release that's out the following week. But, we are hoping to very much keep around and be in cinemas throughout the whole Halloween run and beyond.
Yeah, because that's another, as you say, one of the annoying things with sort of independent movies that you think, oh, I'll go and see that, and you find it's, as you say, it's only there a week and it's gone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Are there any plans to go international with it? Studio Canale is French or Italian, isn't it?
Yeah, they're French owned, although funny, it's that we did sell the film internationally. So we launched the film originally last year in film festivals. Yeah. So it had its world premiere in Toronto. There's a very big film festival there, which is traditionally seen as a bit of a launch pad. And A24, who are the US studio that are known for doing this sort of psychological horror, or, they've done Hereditary, they did The Witch. They've got this tremendous track record. So that they're distributing it in the US, and then we've got another company, Diafana, taking it in France, and then Sony have it for the rest of the world. So yeah, the film did sell out internationally, which again for a British film is quite unusual actually. So we're extremely pleased that it's going to be seen throughout the world.
I suppose it's too early to say, but obviously you made the film some time ago. Are there any sequels in the pipeline?
I don't know. If those people that see the film, they'll realise why a sequel is tricky. So,
right.
I don't want to.
We're heading into a spoiler alert there, so we'll go no further.
Exactly. But yeah, we haven't.
It's supernatural. You can always solve that problem.
Yeah, there's always ways around. Yeah, sequels, prequels. Exactly. The world of Maud. It's. Never say never, but maybe. We are all working together as a team again. So the producers and Rose have got another project that we're very much hoping to shoot next year, which is a different genre, but quite set in the US. It's quite a big film, so we're excited about that one. But yeah, we'll see. Maybe we'll come back to this one and have a look at expanding.
That's brilliant. Well, Andrea, thank you ever so much for your time.
Okay, no problem. Bye.
Take care. Bye now. Bye. Time for our big interview, which this week is with the Scottish, although he now lives in Newfoundland, horror writer William Meikle. We've actually spoken to William before, but that was about 3 years ago, and he now has a new collection of stories out called Carnacki, Starry Wisdom and Other Stories. It's published by Dark Regions Press in all formats. I particularly like Willie Meikle because he's a great example of how a writer of genre fiction can actually make a living from their work through self-publishing and genre publishing houses. So, Willie, let's start with your latest book. And you're a very prolific author. I'm totally envious of you because I'm a very, very slow writer. You're back in the realms of paranormal detection, aren't you?
Yes. Carnacki's been with me for a long time. I read the first Hodgson stories way back in must have been about 1969, 1970, which shows you just about how old I am as well. In the old British Pan collections. I think the first one I read was I don't know if you remember the book, but it's got a horrible cover. It's got a naked guy leading a pig on it. Do you remember that one?
I don't know that one, but I do know of the horrible.
Look on the internet for Karnaki covers. It's one of the worst book covers you'll ever see. But anyway, I read that edition from a shop in my hometown way back when, and the character kind of stuck with me. But it wasn't until about 10 years ago, and one of my publishers at the time said, "Have you ever tried writing any pastiche?" And up to that point, I hadn't. And he said, "Well, have a read of the Karnaki stories again and try and write a couple of them, and we'll see about publishing them." So I did. He published a little chapbook of the first three I wrote. And on the back of that, I got into Dark Regions Press, who published my first collection with them. I got a nice limited edition hardcover, paperbacks and ebooks out of them.
Yeah.
And that got me on the path of writing pastiches. And since then, this is my fourth volume of Karnaki ones. I've written Sherlock Holmes ones and Professor Challenger ones all the time since then as well. Beginning to fade a bit now as I get older. I think I've got most of that out of my system, but the Karnaki's still around. I still enjoy writing them, and there's still a market for them.
What do you think is the lasting attraction of the Karnaki? Because they Karnaki the Ghost Finder, and they're very much Edwardian because the poor guy who wrote them died at the end of the First World War, so it was very much the 1910 era, if you like, the last tales. And reading some of them, they have that slightly dated style of, everybody's round at the club having a fine dinner, and Karnaki holds forth and tells his tale.
Yeah, there's definitely still a market for the club story. I don't know what the enduring appeal of the club story is, but it persists, not just in fiction, but in films as well. And I think it's just the coziness of it. It's a bit like Sherlock Holmes. People like him because it's a known factor. You know what you're going to get when you sit down to read the book.
Yes.
And I think that coziness factor helps in selling them, but it also hinders in writing them because you're constrained in a way that you can't get too far away from the reader's comfort zone. Otherwise, you'll take them out of their cosy zone and ruin the story for them. So there's a bit of a balancing act in writing them, which is, I think, why I'm moving away from them, because I'm finding them a bit too cozy for me these days.
Yes. Yeah, because the latest one is Starry Wisdom and Other Stories, is that it?
Yeah. I started introducing other aspects to Karnaki in the past two collections. He now gets involved with Winston Churchill, a very young Churchill, who was working for the Home Office at the time. And so Karnaki gets to get out and about and get involved in some nefarious activities on behalf of the government, which gives me something else to play with and keep me interested. And it seems to be going down okay with the readers as well. So I've not strayed too far from their comfort zone with that. Yeah. It's kept me interested for a bit.
You say, obviously, you have to be within the comfort zone, and likewise you mentioned Sherlock Holmes, and there's a definite Sherlock Holmes vibe everybody has of what it's like, and London is permanently mist shrouded, and there's the permanent click clack of hansom cabs being drawn by horses going past all the time. So you've got that constraint. Do you find some aspects you've inherited from Karnaki a bit limited? I mean, he's got his electrical pentacle, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Which is
I've also been adding more. I've been giving him more gadgets in my stories as well. He's got a Faraday cage which he can hide inside to keep away from evil things.
Oh, that sounds good. Yeah.
Mine. I came up with the idea for that, which interested me and kept me going for a bit as well. And he also gets involved in not just the electric pentacle, but he's playing with sound and oral techniques like electric voice phenomena and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I've added that to his box of tricks as well. So just adding little bits like that keeps me interested in him as well.
Yeah.
It keeps me going back to him, I suppose.
Yeah. I'm just looking on your website at all your various books there, and although I know you from very much in the horror side of things, you have a huge range of books and interests you've got there. I mean, there's the Operation ones, looking at them, Operation Loch Ness, Amazon, Siberia, North Sea. I think, is North Sea the latest one?
Yeah, what happened there was about 3 years ago, just about the last time we talked, my wife was really ill, and I couldn't focus on anything serious in the writing. And somebody said, well, just try writing something silly, write a creature feature, a big monster book or something, and see if you can get you going. So I did. I wrote the first one of them, and surprisingly it took off. Sold to Sever Press and sold quite a few thousand copies.
That's cool.
And a German publisher picked it up as well. So Sever Press came back to me and said, listen, this looks like it could be a big deal. Do you want to write another few? So I wrote another one, then another one, and now I'm just about to start number 11. And it made me more money than anything else in my career so far. The last couple of years I've been doing really well money-wise at the writing. Better than anything before. And that's just down to writing basically B-movie creature features. I've always been a big creature feature fan. There's always been big beasties in the background in quite a lot of my books. I've got a Vikings against Yeti fantasy novel in there somewhere as well, and I've got a Guy Smith, Jack and Crabs style novel in the background. So there's always been big beasties around. It's another string to go.
Is that Berserker, the Yeti one? Yeah. Let's go back a bit to your writing career. When you were in the UK, you were a journalist, weren't you? I think. No.
I was in IT.
You was in IT, and you.
I worked for. Originally, I went to London in '82. Spent 10 years working for big banks doing IT systems in London.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I got out of that and got back to Scotland in about '91 that I started writing. I didn't do any writing at all until I was in my 30s, 33.
Yeah.
Before I started. And I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to write. When I was younger, much younger, I was writing. I was playing guitar and writing song lyrics a lot, and very King Crimson type poetry, King Crimson influenced poetry.
Yeah.
That was back. It was mid-70s.
Yes.
I wrote a couple of short stories in, and my English teachers liked them, but I didn't, and I put them away. It wasn't until I got back to Scotland in '91, and I found my job really dull. I'd moved up to. I thought I had an idea for a story. It came to me on a train journey. Actually, I thought there's a story about an old man sitting in a cemetery watching a ghost. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Wonder what happens there. So I wrote it down, and I sent it off to Writers News, the British Writers magazine, for their ghost story competition. And surprisingly, I came second, and I won £100 quid at the time back in '92 for my first ever story. I thought, oh, this is easy. I'll do some more of that.
If only you knew, yes.
So if only I knew, yeah. So I spent the next 7 or 8 years after that writing for the British Small Press mags. You remember the old A5 side stapled jobs?
Yep.
And I had a couple of hundred stories published in them, but I wasn't making any money at it. And it was only until about 2000 I decided I should aim my sights a wee bit higher and start submitting to professional markets and trying to get novels published rather than just little stories.
Mm-hmm.
And slowly but surely things started to get better and started to sell some novels, started to get stories in better markets. And by the time 2007 came around, I was certainly selling a lot of stories to professional markets. And my job in Edinburgh died. And I thought, I could either get another IT job or I could try writing full time. So I spoke to my wife. She said, well, we can't afford to stay in Scotland, but we could probably afford it if you went somewhere cheaper. And I said, okay, we'll go to Newfoundland then. So we came over here.
Why Newfoundland? I mean...
we'd been over on holiday.
Right.
It's very like West Coast Scotland island life.
Yeah.
If you're in the Hebrides.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of little fishing villages and low-lying islands and lots of fishermen and peace and quiet, basically.
Yeah.
And the fact that 4-bedroom house on the shore that we've got here with a really great view only cost 40,000 quid. No, 20,000 it was, sorry.
Yeah.
$40,000 at the time. We managed to sell our house in Scotland and bung a load of money in the bank. So I was able to write full time between then and now. And now, just this year, I started collecting a pension from all those IT jobs as well. So
yeah,
we're living okay now. I won't starve anymore.
Yes, it's one of those things that when you talk to people who are just getting into writing, they think, J.K. Rowling, money's here I come, whereas in fact, you don't earn a lot of money, do you?
No, it's not too bad. I mean, I earn enough to have to pay taxes. So.
Well, that's good. That's good, yeah.
You're listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian.
What was the first book you had, first novel you had published?
It was a Scottish horror one called Island Life.
Yeah.
It's a monsters rampaging on a Scottish island story. Some archaeologists dig up a burial mound and wake up with something that's inside it. It's a very traditional 80s style horror novel. That was written back in the late 90s and sold to an American publisher in 2000, who printed up 5,000 copies of it and said, right, we'll sell all of these and then print another 5,000. They only sold about 200, I think. Then they went bust very quickly. There was a few people who are now quite well-known writers were in with them at the time. A guy called Simon Wood. You come across him?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
British. No, he is British, but now in the States, crime writer. He was with them as well. His first novel was with them at the same time. And an American guy called Joe Nassis, who's had several big name fantasy stories. He was with them as well. So there's a few of us got burned with this publisher. But they did give me an in with American publishers. A lot of people learned my name. Yeah. I got a review in Cemetery Dance and a review in Asimov's out of it. So I got my name in quite a few places. So my next novels after that, although they were just selling to small press, were selling a lot more easily.
Yeah.
And then by the time I started selling to bigger and better markets with the short stories, I also got into that Regent's Press in the States, who are one of the biggest small presses in the States.
Yeah.
And they became my main publisher for a while. And I got pretty well known through them.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and you're interesting because you have books that are published by external publishers, but you also still do a lot of self-publishing, or you did.
Yeah, I've done a bit of self-publishing. Yeah, it's mainly short stories and novellas that the novellas are ones that used to be published traditionally and have gone out of print, so I brought them back by myself.
Right.
The rest of the stuff's mainly older short stories, again, from older anthologies or things that are out of print. A lot of the old stuff from those British small press days I've self-published in what I call the chapbook collection now. So there's a load of, as you said earlier, I do write a lot. I mean, I've written, I think I'm on about my 400th short story now that I've written in the past 30 years. And I've got 20-odd novellas and about 30-odd novels as well. So there's a lot of material there, and it comes in and out of print. And if it goes out of print, I don't bother trying to find another publisher for it. I just publish it myself.
Yeah.
Now that I know what I'm doing on Amazon and how to publish things.
Yes. And I did notice that your books are available both digital and in print.
Yes.
Yeah. Is that using the Amazon?
That's using the Amazon KDP stuff, yeah. I figured out how to set up the paperbacks on Amazon. It's not too bad with it. For somebody with an IT background like me, anyway, it wasn't too difficult to figure out how to do all the Amazon setups. If you don't know what you're doing, it's a bit more time-consuming.
Yeah.
I found it quite easy to do.
Yes. What about ideas? Where do you get your ideas from? I mean, obviously with somebody like Carnacki, you're dealing with, you've got the character there and you've got a sort of framework. But for the other ones, where do you think about?
Let's start with the one particular idea. There's a story, a series of books I'm writing at the moment with my own Mickel mythos, if you like, called Sigils and Totems. There's a whole series of books and novellas with that. But that came originally from a nightmare, a recurring one I've had since I was a kid, which was I'm on a hillside and there's a big black bird somewhere in the distance coming towards me. Big, huge thing, like something out of an old movie. And as it gets closer, I see that it's a swan. It's a giant black hairy black feather swan, and it lands beside me and it whispers in my ear. And I've had this nightmare since I was, four or five, and every couple of years I get it. And about 5-6 years ago, I actually heard what it whispered to me in a dream, and it said, "Shall we talk about the black bird?" Which is a quote from the Maltese Falcon.
Right.
And just like that, the idea clicked about a series of supernatural things, starting off with a house where the guy goes to watch the Maltese Falcon in a room where, instead of seeing Bogart and what's her name in the film, he sees himself and his wife playing the film. And that turned into a novella called Broken Sigil, which sold really well for me. And that has now turned into a whole series of books about a house where you can go and see dead people and relive your past with the dead. And that's turning into quite a big thing for me as I get older, because it's like a recurring story, like a recurring dream.
Yeah.
So that's where that one came from. An awful lot of the other stuff comes from old TV watching. Being the age I am, I grew up with Doctor Who and Thunderbirds, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., The Time Tunnel, and lots of early British science fiction stuff.
Yeah.
And that all sort of spins around in my head and it comes out in the books. That and Quatermass, again, has always been a big influence on me as well, especially Quatermass in the Pit.
Yes.
Something that I circle around a lot in a lot of my stories is some of the Nigel Neal's ideas. The Stone Tape film as well is another one where the ideas from that are circling around in my head and come out in slightly different forms in different books as well. So I think a lot of it's just cultural things that you grew up with. Not being a lot of American writers grew up with the Marvel and DC comics, and a lot of that comes out in their writing. Whereas with us British guys, it's like things like the Valiant and the Hotspur and again Thunderbirds and early Doctor Who and all that kind of stuff that comes out in ours. So there's a bit of a cultural difference there.
That's an interesting point that actually you're making. That the all the Marvel comics type of stuff, they didn't really get over here until relatively recently. Whereas
I read some of them when I was a kid, but there weren't that many available. I remember reading some early Spider-Mans and early Thors back in the 60s, but there wasn't something that was culturally was a big thing for us.
Yeah, I know where I grew up. There was a market, and they used to have them on the market stall there, but you could never get, if you like, consecutive editions. It was just whatever they'd got in there, almost like shops that sell remainders. Yeah. And what is your writing method? Do you set yourself down in the morning or at some specific time of the day with a target, or do you scribble down notes and wait for inspiration, or how do you operate on that?
I mostly write by the seat of my pants, actually. I do when I'm writing a novel, sometimes I'm very rarely stuck to one. It's all inspiration, basically. It's all seat of the pants stuff. But I do edit as I go along, so every day I spend about half an hour at the end of the day editing what I've written that day. So it's not as if I'm having to go back and rework a big mess every morning. I always make sure I know at the end of every day what I'm doing the next day, sort of thing.
Yes.
That's a trick I learned from Ramsey Campbell, of all people. He said, always finish when you know what you're going to be doing next. And I took that one to heart.
That's a good point.
But yeah, so he says he sometimes finishes in the middle of a sentence, so he knows that he's got where to go in the morning. He just starts writing the sentence, and usually that gives him momentum to keep going. But although I don't have a method, I usually end up writing about the same amount of words every day. It's somewhere about 1,800 to 2,000 words every day. It just seems to naturally fall into that. Yeah. And over the course of a year, if I do it, I don't have many days off over the course of a year. So that adds up to a hell of a lot of words every year. And 600, 700,000 words is 5-6 novels, or a long one. And it's 10 of those small escort things or more. I could, if the publisher would take them, I could probably push myself to write a dozen of them a year, but I don't think I'll bother with that.
Of the books you're writing, what do you think is your favourite? All the various series and things you've done.
There's a couple of one-offs that I was really proud of. There's one called The Dunfield Terror, which is a story about a British experiment during the war gone wrong off the coast of Newfoundland and the repercussions in the present day. And that's got lots of Lovecraftian stuff, lots of Quatermassy stuff, and even bits of Doctor Who, timey-wimey stuff. I was really pleased with the way that turned out. I got everything I wanted to say said, and the story turned out the way I wanted it. So I was very pleased with that. The other one was a Scottish ghost story called Tormentor, which is set on a house in Skye. And I'd had that idea in my head from way back when I first started writing, but I didn't think I could do justice to it until recently. And I wrote it about 5 years ago now. Sat down and wrote that one out, and that came out again exactly the way I wanted it to, in the voice I wanted it to, and everything just worked right and just fitted right. So that's the two I'm most happy with, I think, the Dunfield Terror one and Tormentor.
Because I mean, one of the things about writers is that they're usually the worst possible critics of their own work.
Yeah.
I've done the same thing, and I've got stuff that just stays in a drawer because I'm just not happy with it, and I don't think it'll ever make the cut. I think a lot of creatives are like that, artists, musicians and the like. What really is the sign of success, other than obviously the dreaded commercial success, which is often not what you think it would be?
No, it's not.
Like you're saying, the Operation Creature Features proved to be your biggest commercial success, even though you're better known for the Lovecraftian horror type of stuff.
I actually had somebody on one of the social media sites yesterday saying that I'm obviously not doing very well because I'm reduced to writing creature features. And, I lost my place with them, I'm afraid. All sorts of good names. But yeah, the success I'm having with that is just seeing people really enjoying them, having readers like them and get back to me and say how happy they are with them and how much they're enjoying them, and people clamouring for more, which is always nice to see.
Yeah.
And that's the success I get out of it. And I very rarely read my reviews, especially the big critic ones, if anything come along. They're not for me; they're for the readers' benefit, really. I think I can sometimes get something out of them. But a couple of years back, St. Josie really trashed me for writing Karnaki. He said it was beneath a modern writer to write Karnaki stories, which for somebody who spends his life minutely studying Lovecraft, I thought was a bit much. But there you go.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a bit of a. I remember seeing about that, and I just thought
having him say such a thing. He said something like, "I don't really know why Mickel bothers being a writer because these things aren't worth anybody's time," or something like that. And he's got a big forum, and a lot of people saw that, and it really pissed me off. Something terrible. So if I ever meet him, he'll get told that as well. But anyway, he annoyed me. But that's not my success. I'm not writing for him. I'm writing for a readership, not for the critics.
Yeah. When you're doing that, when you're writing the book, and I've again encountered this with some people, that they try and anticipate what the reader would like, but others say, no, you must focus on writing the book that you like.
Yeah,
rather than trying to put yourself in somebody else's place.
If anybody else likes it, that's a bonus.
So you're for you write the book that you're happy with, and it's the bonus. Yeah,
especially these creature feature ones I'm writing. The characters are all Scottish and all West Coast Scottish at that, so they all talk like me as well. That helps a lot when writing them because I can just fall into the voice, and the voice just comes naturally. There's a slightly sarcastic, slightly Scottish voice that you hear a lot in Scotland and the West, and all these characters are their banter's all like that. So I fall into it very easily.
Yeah.
I've got another older series about a Scottish private eye, and he's the same. He's from Glasgow, and I can fall into his voice just like putting on an old jacket, a comfy jacket. As soon as I start writing him, I know what he's going to say. So characters like that are really easy for me now, and I'm really happy that other people are liking reading them as well.
And turning to the future, obviously you're currently promoting the new Karnaki series, but what are your next projects?
I've just started writing the next one of the Scottish Squaddies one, but that will go quickly because I've got a good outline for that. It should go quite quickly. My winter project is I had a book out earlier on this year called The Land Below, which is about a group of Victorian adventurers who get into a big deep cave system and get into trouble with it's a Lost World type thing.
Yes.
Again, bit challenging, bit like the Challenger book.
Yes.
With my own characters. And I've been asked by Sever Press to write a sequel to that, and possibly a third one after that as well. So that'll keep me going for a bit. I've also got an idea for another one of my sigil houses that I was talking about earlier, stories.
Yes.
Although the last one I did of them, I self-publishing it, failed. Didn't sell at all. Nobody wanted it, so I'm not so sure about that. We'll see what comes of that.
There doesn't appear to be, does there, any logic why sometimes a book just doesn't take off? You know,
yeah, I know.
Whether it's...
I don't understand it sometimes either. Some things do, some things don't, and you just got to live with it. My bestseller ever, as it turns out, was a science fiction one called The Invasion. It's a little B-movie science fiction thing. And 10 years ago now, about 11 years ago now, it was one of my first ebooks to go on Kindle. And in its first 3 weeks, it sold 15,000 copies on the Kindle. And I thought, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be a horror writer. What's this stuff doing there? But it reached number 2 in the Kindle sci-fi and Kindle horror charts, and up into the top 50 overall on Kindle on Amazon. And it sold 25,000 copies or something in the end. And I had no idea why it took off. So I published another science fiction one after that, and nobody bought it. So
yeah, there's no logic, is there?
Never can tell.
No, that is a huge lock for people who don't realise it. There are just so many books being published on Kindle and Amazon every day that to get into the hundreds, you're doing well on some of the charts. Never mind up at the top 2.
Yeah, it was selling the Invasion thing. It pulled a couple of the other ones along with it, because the one called another Lost World story called The Valley sold over 10,000, and I actually sold a short story called The Abominable about a Yeti on Mount Everest, and that's only 9,000 words. It was going for 99p, but it sold 15,000 copies at that same time. And I thought, that's a short story, and as a short story, it made me something like 1,600 quid just on that wee story, and I could never make that much trying to sell that to a magazine. So,
yeah.
But if everything took off like that, I'd be a millionaire. But every so often something hits.
Yes, I remember some of my freelance journalism things, and some of the more obscure stuff got huge amounts of money for it. Could never repeat the trick, and the rest of the time you're down to lower levels.
Yeah.
Well, many, many thanks for your time, and good luck with your projects in the future.
And you too. Thanks, Charles.
Take care. Once again, a big thank you to William Meikle. Now, about finding him. His surname is actually spelled Meikle, but pronounced Mickel. And you can find him on Amazon or go to his own website at www.williammeickle, that's Meikle, WilliamMeikle.com. And it's an excellent site and has links to and descriptions of all his books. Now, foreign holidays are a bit of a pain for anybody living in the UK. In fact, for most people living in, North America and Europe as well as the UK. Not least the fact that you can't go to some places, or if you do go there, you're going to be either in lockdown when you first arrive, or you're going to be in some similar form of quarantine when you come back home. So, what about this? Visiting Deadman's Island on the north coast of Kent in England. It would make an ideal day trip, except for the fact its visitors are banned unless you can get some special permission, because it's a recognised bird breeding and nesting site and a designated site of special scientific interest owned by Natural England. Anyway, Deadman's Island is just off the River Medway and opposite Queensborough on the Isle of Sheppey. All these are places anybody in Kent will know. It's on the south side of the River Thames, and it is littered with human remains. This is because the island used to be a burial ground for those who died aboard prison ships over 200 years ago. These were called hulks, and they were decommissioned naval warships used to house convicts awaiting transportation to Australia. In fact, sometimes they didn't even get to Australia. They just were imprisoned on a hulk. You can find more about that in Charles Dickens' Great Expectations, where Abel Magwitch is the escapee from one such prison hulk. Anyway, rising sea levels, coastal erosion and lower tides have resulted in numerous rotting wooden coffins, skulls, bones, fragments protruding from about 6 feet, that's 2 metres, of mud that previously covered the area. Indeed, the island was once covered by sea and is still a dangerous place in which to walk. A BBC news team visited the island in 2017, and its director, Sam Supple, described the island in the following terms. It's like being on the set of a horror film. It looks so surreal. It's like an art department has designed it. There are open coffins and bones everywhere. He went on to say, "What I saw there will stay with me forever. This is a really strange sight. I can't imagine there's anywhere else on Earth like this." The island is completely uninhabited, not surprisingly, and has generated local folklore which warns of hounds with glaring red eyes who eat the heads of buried corpses. Open coffins and scattered human remains litter a section of riverbank at this location known as Coffin Bay. Convicts on the floating prisons who had died of cholera or other diseases were buried in unmarked graves on the island. And keeping with grim news of that nature, similar human remains have been discovered at nearby Chatham, also on the River Thames, where French prisoners of war were held during the Napoleonic Wars. They were buried in nearby marshes. However, when their bones were revealed by erosion, they were exhumed and reburied. It has been suggested that the remains on Deadman's Island should be similarly reburied, but the treacherous terrain makes that difficult, as well as the constantly changing seascape washing the convicts' bones out to sea. So, if you're grim, a place to go for a holiday. If you're not grim, a place to avoid like the plague. Time for another of our fabulous creatures where I delve into folklore and legend to come up with some awful creature. Some of them I've covered have been quite nice, but I know most of them are a bit on the macabre side. And this one is Jenny Greenteeth. She has many different names, more about them later, but you'll normally see her described as the Lancashire, in England, version of what in folklore are known as nursery bogies. Fearsome creatures invoked by your parents to scare children into either behaving better or keeping them from danger. For example, when I was growing up in Yorkshire, my grandmother used to warn me that if I was naughty, I would be eaten by Tom Dockin with his iron teeth. He apparently lived under my bed and would come out and eat me with his teeth if I didn't behave. Yeah, it explains a lot about me, doesn't it? So much for child psychology in the mid-20th century. But what about the second role of nursery bogies, keeping children safe from danger? This is where Jenny Greenteeth and her kin enter the picture, because one of the things all kids love doing is messing about in water, whether it's streams, rivers, lakes, meres, old quarry pits, or even rock pools on the seashore. Regardless of the potential risk of drowning, all kids are drawn to water, especially in summer. But if your children ignore your warnings, they should take care near water because it's dangerous. You could scare them by saying, "Jenny Greenteeth, with her long bony fingers and green fangs, will snatch children off the riverbanks and drag them down to her watery lair to drown them and eat them." And it's not just Jenny Greenteeth. Across England, there are numerous regional variations of these malicious water demons, including Peg Powler, Grindylow, Nellie Longarms, the Scottish water wraith, and the truly awful sounding rawhead and bloody bones, who bizarrely can also sometimes be found lurking in the cupboard under the stairs, another place naughty children aren't meant to go. Is it just an English thing or Scottish thing? No, because across Central and Eastern Europe and on into the Balkans, there are recurring folk tales and legends of evil spirits or demons that lurk in ponds and lakes and swamps. Monsters that prey on grazing animals and passing humans. In Serbia, they call them Bukovacs. In Poland, it is the Wodnik. In Germany, it is the Wasserman. In the Czech and Slovak fairy tales, they are called Vodnik. And in Russia, they call them Vodonyinoi. Different names, but beneath the surface, no pun intended, the same creatures with the same characteristics. There is even a suggestion that freshwater mermaids, such as the Lorelei on the River Rhine in Germany, are members of the same family of beasties. Indeed, one thing all of them have in common is they are described as having greenish complexions, rather like the green scum of duckweed on stagnant water, and long green hair, which again sounds rather like the long green underwater reeds that can entangle the legs and arms of unsuspecting children playing in the water. But are they all just variations of nursery bogies, or is there some deeper, more ancient folkloric theme underlying them? For example, in some accounts, Peg Powler is described as the evil goddess of the River Tees, which is in northeast England. So is this a throwback to pre-Christian traditions of water deities who can be found in the culture of people living on pretty much every continent? Water deities include river gods, such as Old Father Thames in England, and water nymphs who preside over fountains, wells, and streams and bodies of fresh water. So perhaps Jenny Greenteeth and her ilk are not so much malevolent demons, but merely relics, a remembrance of old gods and goddesses who've been demonised by the Christian Church. I was on Etsy the other day, the online bargains, DIY, whatever, shop, handmade stuff. Like a lot of people, we're not getting into the shop so much and browsing for things, so do it online. Anyway, I came across a item called a Memento Mori coin. Now, Memento Mori is a medieval tradition reminding people that one day you will die. Yeah, cheery thought. And the coin has two sides. On one side of it is a carving of the artist, Susan Elaine Jones. She's the woman who is selling them. And you can find it on Susan Elaine Jones' Etsy site. It shows a carving of her. And it says, "As you are now," and the words carpe diem. Carpe diem means seize the day. And on the other side, there is a skull. And the wording, "I once was." And it's really to remind you that if you sit around watching daytime TV all day, well, life's going to run out and you'll no longer be able to do anything. So while you are still alive and living, get out and enjoy yourselves, or at least do something, and don't wait until the Grim Reaper comes. It actually goes back to a medieval theme of the meeting of the three living and the three dead. Sometimes it's three kings, sometimes it's a priest and a holy man and a king. Anyway, they are healthy, wealthy, happy-go-lucky people, and they're out one day hunting, and they meet three skeletons or three rotting corpses coming in the opposite directions. And the three skeletons accost the three living with the phrase, "As you are now, we once were. As we are now, you will become." So, Memento Mori. Get on, do something. And I say the idea of the coin is that you bring it out and if you're feeling a bit down, you flip it and say, time's moving on, better do something. Better go on with another story. A few weeks ago, our guest on this show was Lucia Staza, and she mentioned that she's the editor of a book called Everyday Magic, a pagan book of days. And I had a little look into it, and I found this one for mid-October, and it's called Burying the Past. Basically, you find a dead leaf and you write on it, ideally in some form of water-soluble, non-toxic ink. I'm sure you can get a Sharpie of some sort like that. And you write on it a wish to be rid of a bad habit or an addiction. Wasting time, smoking, whatever. So you write on the leaf, obviously needs to be quite a large leaf, goodbye, insert whatever it is, let's say, goodbye smoking. You were part of my life, but now you are dead to me. I consign you to the earth. May you rot there. Let there be fertile ground for better things to come in the fullness of time. And as I say, you write that on the leaf, you bury the leaf, it rots away, and hopefully your bad habit dies but provides the mulch, the fertiliser for something better. Thank you for that, Lucia. And that's it. Time for me to go. But before we do, here's a short cautionary tale, or you could call it sage advice. Apologies for the terrible pun coming up. Firefighters were called, this is in August, to report. Firefighters were called to reports of a smoke alarm going off in a house in Long Eaton, Derbyshire. The fire brigade arrived to find a man dressed in, and this is their quote, a religious outfit, who'd carried out an exorcism to get rid of an unwanted presence. The spokesman for the fire station said, this was a false alarm caused by smoke from an exorcism. Sage had been lit and this triggered the smoke detection system. Now, just remains for me to say, this is Charles Christian saying thank you so much for listening. Please join me again next week. Until then, stay well, stay weird, stay different.
Black Shuck, the demon dog of East Anglia, is baying at the moon, which means it's time for us to go. You've been listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic and folklore. You can keep in touch with us online at www.weirdtalesradio.com, by email to weirdtales@icloud.com, and on Twitter @ChristianUncut. Join us again next week for another edition of the Weird Tales radio show. Good night.